is ready to talk about relief funding. So exciting, so exciting. I always start every presentation with, I talk really fast when I get excited or nervous, so you can pick which one it is, but if at any point you need to go, slow down, I take feedback too. So I will try to not get talking too fast. But we've all heard of the ESSER relief packages. So there were 3 federal legislations that were passed. Some of us got, our relief funding in the mail along with them. The first was the CARES, and then the SRSA, I think that's how we pronounce it, and then the ARPA was the third one. And in each one of those, a specific amount of funds were set aside for each state to distribute out. So this is North Dakota's allocations that we received and the dates that we were awarded. Now the fun thing about ESSER was that they were all allowable to spend the whole time back to when the pandemic started on March 13th. So your poor business managers and superintendents and yourselves, your school boards, everybody was just getting like, here's more. Oh yeah, you can use it for this, you can use it for that, but we need you to track this. Like it was so much. And with this, we were like, could they just have given us some people? So we're with you, and we feel your pain too, that it was like just a mad dash. And like Stan said in the last, segment, this was kind of the last thing people were thinking about at that time. It was like, how do we keep our kids safe? Are we, vaccinating? Are we going home? What are we doing? So like the money was great to address some needs. However, it was sort of back burner at the time that it happened. So ESSER 1 is done. That was done, required to be done last fall, September 30th. You have until September 30th of 23 to spend your ESSER 2 funds, and then September 30th of 24 to spend your ESSER 3 funds. You do have 90 days after that date to finish claiming out and requesting reimbursement. So if you can receive delivery of something by September 30th and it would meet the requirements of it, you can absolutely spend it. Everybody should have gotten in your handouts a little, kind of looked something like this, lots of numbers and spreadsheety. We just gave you the ESSER 2 and ESSER 3 remaining funds so that you could see. If there's anything showing under your remaining amounts, then that's what you have left to spend out of those. So pay attention to your timelines, because you're going to want to make sure we get those claimed and spent out. So we were given the funds from the federal government, and they said, here you go do all this extra work and make it happen, and good luck to all of your LEAs as well. And they told us that we needed to use the Title I funding formula to determine the ESSER 3 allocations. So in that, our executive leadership was like, not every district in North Dakota qualifies for a Title I grant right now. So we did use a pretty significant portion of our state set aside allocation to make sure that all districts had the option. Some didn't take it, but all districts at least had the opportunity to receive the ESSER funding. Like I said, the funding can be used for any pre-award costs dating back to March 13th of 2020. So the biggest thing that you're going to want to make sure as you're working through budgeting and doing your things, it has to meet all 3 of these. So it has to be COVID related for the purpose of preventing, preparing, and responding. Activities fall into the allowable uses of ESSER funds. We'll go through them kind of at a super high level, and they meet the necessary and reasonable standards set in UGG. That said, make a case. If you feel like something, your allowable activities are very, very broad here. If you wouldn't be embarrassed to say it out loud, by all means, use that as your justification for it. We are not going to be saying, well, did that really seem to, if it's way out there, you might get a pushback from Annie Butterworth as the program manager, and she may say, hey, how does this meet? How does this, prevent, prepare, and respond to COVID-19? And then somebody might have to have that response ready. But if you feel like you have a justifiable, those are your requirements. It needs to meet those 3, fall into the allowable use of funds, and be considered reasonable and necessary. So we printed out, but I'm not going to read them all to you, all of the allowable uses of funds of the ESSER program. There are a lot. So basically number one is your federal education. Like if it is allowable under another program, it is most likely allowable to use ESSER funds for it. So that's going to help us meet that second, requirement on the tab before. It's pretty broad. If it's allowable anywhere, it's going to do that. So obviously in the beginning, we were all looking at, the preventing and the responding to, and we need tile floor, not carpet, so we can sanitize better. We bought masks. We bought all of the, different stickers to make sure that kids were staying far enough apart, more of the preparedness and response efforts to that. Once everybody came back, now we're looking at some different uses of it, and now we're hopefully getting some good impacts on like the stuff that Stan talked about during your last session here with addressing learning loss, addressing those who are most disproportionately affected by remote learning, by the situation. I mean, maybe they were still in school, but they were impacted disproportionately by COVID for one reason or by COVID-19. So number 4 on here, just wanted to say, we really encourage people to look at addressing the unique needs of those students that were, in the demographic that were more impacted by it. So you guys can read through all of these. Like I said, a lot of them we were doing in the beginning was how do we, prepare for long-term closures, and we got everybody hotspots, and we needed one-to-one devices, and we did all of this training hopefully with your teachers for how to better online teach and kids how to better online learn. I mean, it was just such a mad dash at the beginning of it that it's been kind of fun now to see some of the different ideas that people have had, and we as the state education agency have been able to implement some things that we might not have had funding for before, to say, hey, we have these discretionary funds. What's something that could impact this? How could we use our funds in a positive way? And that's where our, Be Legendary, some of that started. And obviously our legislators liked it and wanted to keep it going. So that's a good thing. We've heard of some different programs. I think Jamestown did like a drone program with the college, not sure how that meets preparing, responding, whatever, but if they have the justification, good on them. So some people are getting creative. We might ask you for what that is, but I don't think you're going to get a really hard pushback from us, because we want to see people implementing good programs that positively impact students. That's where we're at with all of it. So the last one here is addressing learning loss. That's the main thing that I wanted to point out to you. So if you're looking at your sheet on here, you can see you have your ESSER 2 expended, and we're tracking your business manager's claim by, was it salaries, was it, supplies, all the different things. So we can quickly run a report and extrapolate out that information for you guys if anybody needs it. But the requirement of ESSER 3 was that 20% of your funds had to be spent to address learning loss, learning recovery. So as your teams are requesting reimbursement, we're looking at, okay, you're requesting salaries. Does that qualify for a learning loss category? And let's get that claimed in there so that we can make sure that you hit that 20% requirement. So that is a big thing that you're going to want to make sure that you're hitting that if you haven't already. And like I said, the rest of these are just going through all of the different allowable uses of funds. I forgot to say at the beginning, we do have Adam here because he is knows everything on construction, capital, well, most everything, capital expenditures, things like that. So some of you may talk to Adam Tesha, our school finance officer, as you're working through things. Super knowledgeable, super helpful. So if you have specific questions, stop me from talking fast. Feel free to ask Adam. This again, we're going back through all of it. So part of the ESSER 3 funds was that when they applied for your funds, your school board, your superintendent, they had to basically tell us, what is your plan for these funds? Well, if you remember, we got these funds in March of 21. We were still trying to spend ESSER 1, ESSER 2, and people were back in school, and now we were dealing with new and different things. So what we planned in March of 21 is probably, should be, very different than what we're doing right now. So one of the requirements for the ARP Act was that you have to post your plan publicly on your school board website, or on your school website. That needs to be updated every 6 months until the ESSER 3 funds are gone. So make sure you're getting your stakeholder input and putting that out there and updating all of that. And obviously we assume that it will change. It should. You should be doing, you know, different things now than what we were doing then. Basically, like Kirsten had said before in another, I heard her giving a presentation saying, you know, we kind of use ESSER 1 to like meet the needs. ESSER 2 was like, okay, how do we expand? Maybe try some different things to address learning loss, see if they work. And ESSER 3 is where you really want to double down. Like what worked, what has been working, what's been getting results, and let's like really kind of stick into that and continue working with that within your schools. So the reporting requirements. Last biennium, we had a little legislative report we had to do. Nobody liked it. We tried to make it as pain-free as possible. Our legislators realized that we have been responsible, reporting well. You know, we can very clearly see where districts are spending their funds. You're posting your public what you're doing with it. So that report requirement went away. However, we cannot convince the federal government to let us be. So they have a very, very labor-intensive report, and it gets sent out to your district every spring. Somebody takes the time to work through this, and basically they're answering all the questions on this. It kind of, I think it looks like a SurveyMonkey, only it's a different platform, but they're going through and answering all these questions, and then the program manager, Annie Butterworth, she is collating it all to report for the state to the feds, and that report is a bear. So what they're asking for on there is the categories that you spent it on. Well, I could say you spent it on salaries, but were they salaries for one of the 19 different ways that you can spend your money? So I'm not sure how your district is tracking, but know that they're going to have to be able to report on what allowable use of funds, what areas did you spend your funds on. And it used to be that they had to check a box and say, did this, were these activities, was this expenditure to meet the needs of students disproportionately impacted? Check yes, check no, everybody moves on. This year they're asking for the number. So they're saying, we want the demographic of the, you know, whichever the demographic is that you're deciding was disproportionately impacted. Maybe it's homeless students. We need the number of homeless students in your districts and the number of homeless students that participated in that program. That is new, so brace somebody for it, because they're not going to be very excited about it when they see it. We weren't either. Kirsten's been very vocal and trying to, you know, respond to some of these things as far as like the time and the, you know, undue burden on states for this reporting. Who's using this information? You know what I mean? Like, you want to look at it as a district. Maybe our legislators wanted to make sure that we were doing things to impact students. You're looking at all of your assessment data with Stan that, like, it just feels very onerous. So we apologize, we empathize, we cannot change it. It is a requirement. So you do have to just track what you were doing and the student groups that will be impacted. So, go ahead.
So if they had expended all of the ESSER funds, do they still have to go back and do that? Like,
if they've already expended all of it?
Yeah.
Nope, you do an annual report on what you did that year. So if you spent it all out already, you may not have a report. Now, if it was after, I think it's a June 30th cutoff, so maybe they, you know, spent some in July here, then you'll have to report on that in the spring. But once your funds are expended, you are off the hook for that part of it anyways. I'm sure they'll be back. I'm sure there will be monitor. I'm sure there will be a lot more to do with it. But that is the only annual report that's now required is federal level, not us. The other thing to keep in mind, I know a lot of people started doing construction, and it was not until almost 6 months ago that somebody said, oh, by the way, this is all subject to Davis-Bacon requirements. Davis-Bacon is the Department of Labor. I feel pretty confident in my Department of Ed federal requirements. I do not feel confident at all in the Department of Labor. So Annie Butterworth, our program manager, spent a few months on every call and every way she could to say, is there any way to get this exempt from? Is there any way to do, because not all federal programs are subject to it. No getting around it. We are all subject to Davis-Bacon with any ESSER funds that are spent. So there have been a ton of webinars, a ton of PowerPoints. Like I said, I am not a Department of Labor expert, so I won't even try to touch that. Just know that anything over $2,000, that quickly adds up in this market. I mean, if you paint something, you're probably paying over $2,000 for supplies and labor at this point. So be careful and know. Now, most large contractors, if you're building a new school, they're very aware of Department of Labor requirements. They'll happily hand you their prevailing wages. They'll happily show you all of the requirements to meet this. But when you hire, you know, Rebecca Pollard Enterprises to come in and do something for you, she is not a Department of Labor person, and you're going to want to make sure that you are covered. So just know, if you're doing construction, anything over 2,000, be careful, ask lots of questions, watch lots of webinars. Large construction, what's our thresholds, Adam? When do people start talking to you and checking in with you on expenditures?
Over 150,000 needs department approval.
Good. Anything else?
Again, comes quick. We've had windows now that are starting to hit that threshold when they do the whole district.
So is it 150 as a district or 150 as a project? Sorry to put you on the
It's
spot.
by the project. A lot of them will say though our windows are one project.
Oh, sure.
So
So if you're getting close to 150, get in touch with Adam, get your pre-approval, learn all the other requirements that are going to be a part of that. And if you can't tell, I'm actually here on behalf of my boss today. I'm not the subject matter expert in all of this either. I get to come and present to you guys, which is why I get to say, hey, if you have questions, go ahead, ask these other people. I felt kind of cheesy that I was like, geez, I don't even have my contact information up there. Like, don't call me. No, we will gladly help you. If you have questions on reimbursements, if you have questions on, you know, allowability, things like that, please reach out, have your superintendent, your business manager, whomever is submitting your stuff, reach out to us. We will gladly help wherever we can. But yeah, this is my fast talking. So I think if anybody has any additional questions on ESSER funds, make sure you get your ESSER 2 spent by September 30th and claimed before the 90 days after that. And then you've got another year on ESSER 3 to hit all your learning loss requirements and double down on all the things that are working. Anything that we think I might have missed? You might have a good question. You might want to say it out loud. Is it good, Adam? Do we need to share it? Vital? If you have a question, I bet you somebody else does. That's always the thing. Yeah, please.
Sorry, John, go ahead.
These annual reports that are coming in for each
Mhm.
phase, okay, is the department, how closely is the department scrutinizing those expenditures, whether they're allowable or not, to try and help during the actual auditing process?
Correct. So we feel like we're doing a pretty good job on the front end of the ESSER, well, now on all, across all. We switched to a grants management system about a year ago. And so, well, a couple years now. Every time a claim is submitted, how you can see those categories there, your district is saying, I'm submitting this much on salaries, this much on a contract, all of these things. And then they're attaching a ledger. They are actually attaching your accounting ledger. And the program manager, so we have a level 1 person that's saying, are these all put in the right category for Adam's reporting? Does this look like a contract? Are these really supplies? And then your program manager is going to say, okay, how did this prevent, respond? You know what I mean? They might come back to you with some of those allowability. Some of those, can you clarify a little better? Like, food isn't generally allowed for federal funds. Did you have a parent and family engagement? Did you have a different? So we are very proactive on the front end. Ask your business managers, they will complain about us. But we're trying to make it so that we are not getting in a point later where it's like, oh, that wasn't allowable. Well, nobody wants to be there. Nobody.
And to answer your question, Wayne, so as much as we can. So as much as we can. Obviously, if things are egregious, blatant, red flag, we will go over that with all of you. But with that being said, there's 7 grants managers, I believe, or program managers for thousands of ledger entries that are being, and so we are in the middle of audits as well with our federal government, our U.S. Department of Ed, and so we have just as much skin in the game as you might. Am I answering your question?
Just wondering how much is being collected up front. How much are we really assisting with making sure we're staying in the lanes? Like I said, the lanes are really, really wide. Make a case. However, your tracking is the most important part. You need to be, tracking federal funds by their allowable source, all the things you probably have already heard, or somebody within your district knows and is doing. We're gonna quick look at them, make sure they're meeting our requirements, and then, you might get a further question from a specific program person. Go ahead.
So the years upcoming forward, a lot of these schools use this ESSER fund for their wages. Is there going to be any more funding to help subsidize the schools that are now bump these wages way up and now maybe can't afford them?
So, no more funding, no more extension of the funding, sorry. But what we've asked our school districts to do, and you as school board members, as you work through your budget approval with your leadership, the advice that we gave for there were 3 different ESSER funds, as you heard. The advice we gave on the first, a third of your money, spend a third of your money on things that you know work. If you have 50 kids in summer school, get 100 in, okay? Second, third, try things that you've never done before, that you've always wanted to try. Last third, this year, analyze what had an impact and what didn't. Stop doing the things that didn't move the needle that Stan shared with you, and use the data to invest. So what the department has done and is doing is we're making available all of the ways that the school districts have been using their money and providing sources of revenue like Title I, Title II, Title IV that are allowable for that. So now that, and how you can blend and braid those. Together. And our superintendents, there were 12 school districts that sent their superintendent and business manager and a couple REA folks to get trained on what's called results-based budgeting. And they will be sharing at the NDCEL conferences, they'll be sharing through their REAs on how to help districts budget differently, because essentially the way most school districts have built budgets is to say, well, this is how much we spent last year on this, and we're gonna include inflation, and we wanna do some new stuff, so this is how much we need. And none of us actually build our family budgets that way.
No.
So what we're asking school board and district leaders to do is say, what actually made a difference? What should we keep spending more on? This is how much money we have. And so that's as I said, there's a dozen superintendent business managers that are trained on that. There's free tools, and the department will be sharing out first part of September a list of all the things that has been gone across the state, all of the activities, including money for teachers, and saying, and here's some additional revenue sources you can use when this COVID funding goes away.
I know that's one of the questions quite a few board members asked, like, yeah, we can give them a raise now, but what about next year?
Well, and it really was supposed to be, what are they doing above and beyond? Like, are they putting in extra hours? Are they doing extra training?
There is a lot of them that were, but
Yes.
now they still are.
Now that they're back to the
How
regular.
do you hold them?
Right. Yes. I hear you. Anybody else? Anything? Sorry to be so quick and fire through. Please do reach out with questions. We will help your teams with allowability. We will help your teams with how to get your claims submitted correctly so that they are, accurately tracking. We were going to do a break, but I'm too fast, so you're right on to the next one.